So for anybody who wishes to take Jesus literally at his word, I shall prepare some saws and various other medical instruments over in the north transept, and we can arrange for you to cut off a foot or dig out an eye or lop off a hand, whatever it is that's causing you to stumble. It can all be dealt with in our north transept after the service, all right? Yeah, we'll have medical professionals on standby just in case, yeah? I caught sight of a rather sobering internet meme this week. It said something along these lines. Imagine, it said, that it is the year 2124, 100 years from now. You, regretfully, are dead. No living person has any memory of you. To your great-great-great-grandchildren, you're just a name on a family tree. Someone else will be living in your house, and they will have ripped out all the refurbishments that you spent a fortune on, that new kitchen, that new bathroom, and they will have replaced them with their own. Someone else will be caring for your garden. They will have replaced all your expensive shrubs with the ones that they like. Everything you owned in 2024 is now either in a rubbish dump or it belongs to someone else. Oh, it's quite sobering, isn't it? And it's deeply reminiscent of that parable that Jesus told of the man who built many barns in which to store his wealth. You fool, says God to him. What's the point of gathering all this stuff? You really can't take it with you, you know. And that theme is taken up and then expanded by this letter of James, who incidentally may or may not have been the brother of Jesus. Scholars are divided on the topic. But James recognizes that wealth is often acquired on the backs of poor people, of the laborers in the fields specifically. Or perhaps, in our case, the sweaty factories of Asia. To the rich, James writes, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. But this isn't always true, it has to be said. It's perfectly possible to make money without exploiting others. I was interested to read this week that Sir Paul McCartney, he of the Beatles, I realize the Beatles are a dangerously modern group for some of you here, but bear with me here. All right, the Beatles, Sir Paul McCartney, is one of the first musical billionaires, along with a young woman called Taylor Swift, who I think I've heard of. Sir Paul's wealth comes thanks to the sales of pre-released Beatles albums that he's re-released and of a new Beatles song that was made last year using an old tape they found of John Lennon's voice. Good for Paul, I say. He's a man of amazing talent, and he has basically and simply persuaded people to buy his records and come to his concerts. His session musicians and his publishers have no doubt been paid, so no one really was exploited by Paul becoming a billionaire. But Sir Paul and Taylor Swift, for that matter, face the same dilemma as all wealthy people. The same dilemma that, in fact, we face. And if you don't think of yourself as wealthy, let me ask you to reimagine for a moment. For if you have more than 10 pence in your pocket, if you have a warm bed to sleep in at night and a roof that is guaranteed to keep the rain off, if you have food in your fridge sufficient to last more than just today, then you are richer than something like 90% of the world's population. And so we face the same dilemma, albeit that we're not billionaires. And the dilemma is this: How much of the wealth that I've accumulated should I keep to guard against the trials and the indignities of old age and to pass on to my descendants? And how much should I release into the world to carry out my Christian, my religious, my moral obligation to care for others? It's a constant battle for us, isn't it? And you know, the church also has the same dilemma. In Mark's Gospel, we read this morning, before all that stuff about cutting off limbs, we read that Jesus warned us against putting a stumbling block in the way of anyone's faith. One of the more persistent rants that I get on the internet it comes from those who wonder why the church is constantly asking for money when it has so much wealth already stored up. It's a real stumbling block for many. People say to us, why should I contribute to your appeal for a disabled toilet or to help the homeless when you have a safe full of silver chalices in there and you have land all over the parish that you could sell? It's a perfectly reasonable question. The standard answer to this question is that, in fact, the church is the custodian of all this wealth. By various canon laws and deeds of trust from previous generations, cashing in our wealth to pay for mission, for example, or to build that accessible toilet, or to fund that homeless shelter, is remarkably difficult. Nay, it's even impossible. We hold this wealth in our massive barns, and a church, at the end of the day, is a kind of barn. And we hold it to pass it on to our descendants. Ironically, they won't be able to use it either for much the same legal reasons. I remember a story told to me by the now acting Archdeacon of Portsdown, Canon Bob White, Vicar of St. Mary's down in Portsmouth a few years ago. He was meeting with the pastor of an independent church who held their services in a rented school hall. They had none of the concerns that we have about maintaining a building like this. And Bob told me how the pastor looked jealously at Bob and at his enormous barn of a church. I don't know if you've ever been into St. Mary's Fratton, but it's a cathedral-sized building. It's glorious, and it's got wonderful stained glass and a magnificent organ that they've just spent hundreds of thousands of pounds restoring, a glorious ceiling with angels looking down and all the rest of it. And the pastor said to Bob winsomely, "Oh, I wish we had such a building as this. Oh, what an amazing tool for mission it would be." And do you know what Bob did? He got his keys out of his pocket and handed them to the pastor, jokingly, of course, but said, "Here, take it. You'd be welcome to it." He was joking. It would be legally impossible. There's the problem. But Bob's point was that if he could spend even a fraction of his time that he spends caring for his enormous barn, if he could spend that time in mission, then the kingdom might be more advanced within his parish. It's a great balancing act in which we're engaged. I feel that pressure every day and at every meeting where we have to talk about what needs doing in the building and what repairs are needed to the roof and how we can complete our long-term goal of building that accessible toilet at the back. You know, there's many things I'd like to be doing that are much more about getting down and dirty with those who are really in need. On the one hand, our building is a repository of the life and the memories of this community. It's a sign and a signal to the world that there is a different kingdom. There's a different economic and political system on offer. It's a place that's soaked in the prayers of this community for something near 1,000 years that we know about. It's a place that lifts our eyes and our minds and our spirits beyond the everyday, beyond the humdrum of getting our washing done and digging our garden. It lifts our eyes and helps us to fix them on the promise of heaven. But it is also a vacuum cleaner for the cash that we pour into keeping it standing and for the time that we spend administering it. And so it is both a glorious gift, not just to us, but to our community, but it is also a time-sucking money pit around our necks. There's no easy answer to these questions. Neither the question of what we do with a church building or what we do with our personal wealth. I can't give you a simple formula and tell you what is right. But it is important that both personally and corporately we keep on asking the question, praying for wisdom from the Spirit of God, that we may find the grace and the wisdom to use the resources that we have been blessed with for the benefit of others and for the glory of God. Amen. Amen.